All Might stood out over the entire city. He was assigned to teach today, but it looked like he would be late, which was definitely going to get him in trouble. After all, it was going to be a big day today. The first UA rescue drills. They even built the entire USJ just for it. He wanted desperately to see his successor take on the challenge, but the city still needed help. It still needed its symbol. Unfortunately, he wasn't strong enough to carry on that burden himself these days. He couldn't be as effective, at least not alone like he used to be. West side of the city's clear. He heard the gruff voice of Wolverine on the other end. Said X-Man was rubbing the crust out of his eyes from what had to be his third tour on the beat. Logan wasn't usually the kind of person to get tired, but Japan just wasn't that interesting in terms of crime. He used to live in New York City, basically the superhero capital of the world. Crime there was something you stumbled into basically every second step, but here? Sure, there was some stuff. A lot of stuff today, actually, but most of it wasn't supervillain related. He would usually just show his face, and whatever criminal was holding somebody up, they'd almost immediately surrender to him. His reputation from overseas apparently having preceded him. He almost wondered what it would be like if an actual A-lister like Superman showed up. These guys would probably toss all of their weapons to the ground and beg for mercy. East side's clear, Mirko said on the other side. She was disappointed she was placed so low this far away, but she was willing to go through with it. At the very least, it showed All Might had a lot of confidence in her ability. One major hero per sector. Well, mostly. All Might insisted on taking 2 sectors of the city all for himself. Are we going to be done here anytime soon? I do want to see Laura's performance today.
To be honest, I don't think we're going to be done patrolling the city in time.
All Might admitted, a bit of sweat moving down his face. He heard Mirko groan on the other end, and he smiled as he shook his head. He himself had hoped to be done patrolling the city in at most an hour, but even though the crimes were small, they were numerous. It was like something was happening every hour or so. He was really thankful that there were more experienced teachers at UA this year. With his powers waning, especially with the beginning of the process of him passing them on to young Shield, he really needed the help. He could only hope that she could have the confidence to face this challenge without him looking over her shoulder. Rescue drills? I almost can't believe it. Melissa at this point was grabbing onto her pants in stress. She looked down at her lap. The seams on her clothes were basically crumpled like paper as she rocked up and down with the bus. She was one of the students who had chosen to wear her full costume for this exercise, whereas Izuku had gone with the UA sports outfit. Same for Toph, actually. Melissa actually almost regretted her decision. She was standing out a pretty good amount, even among her peers. It wasn't that everybody was looking at her. A bunch of people were wearing their costumes, but it was just enough for her to feel out of place, like she was being watched. Izuku, meanwhile, wasn't much help in supporting her in the moment. He had been exhausted from helping everybody get on board the bus, his responsibility as class president. He was more exhausted from the fact that Ida tried to give him a seating chart that Izuku did try to use to make his friend feel better. Unfortunately, the bus's open layout completely ruined that idea, and Izuku had to spend the first 10 minutes consoling Ida about it. Thankfully, around him, the rest of the class seemed to be doing much better. They were excitedly talking about how their training sessions were going, and how they were going to be able to use their quirks in this cool rescue scenario. That was when Tsuyu Asui spoke up. Actually, if we're going to talk about her quirks, I kinda want to bring something up. She glanced over to Melissa, who snapped out of her internal spiral to meet her eyeline. You know, Shield, your quirk's actually a lot like All Might's. 3 people in the room stiffened all at once, fear shooting up and down their body. Toph was the first person to relax, just shrugging and moving on with her day. But Izuku tried to blurt something out as soon as he could as a helping line. Well, All Might doesn't need a bracer to use his punches, he replied, pointing at the red gauntlet that Melissa made to handle 100% of her power. I'd say if anything, Melissa's power is a bit more outward, and her body just hasn't adapted to it quite yet. More of a stockpiling thing, he continued, his voice getting faster and faster as he did. Right, yeah, I definitely think that's how it is, Asui, Melissa said, looking at Tsuyu with eyes so shaky she couldn't keep them straight. I mean, that would be like me comparing you to Toad from Magneto's Brotherhood. Tsuyu went quiet for a moment, and Melissa felt her throat close, almost like her body knew that she had just said something that she shouldn't. Thankfully, the tension in the room broke when Tsuyu spoke once more. I told you all to call me Sue. Shouldn't be that hard for you, you're American, Tsuyu replied. Right, yeah, sorry, you can call me Melissa, too, Melissa said. Noted, Tsuyu replied. You know, even if your powers do hurt you sometimes, it's gotta be pretty cool to have an enhancer-type power. You can do a bunch of flashy stuff with that. My hardening quirk isn't really useful for much other than taking a beating, Kirishima replied. Are you seriously saying taking a beating's not impressive? Riri asked. That's all some heroes do. Luke Cage, Wolverine, their powers are designed for them to take beatings, and look how famous they got. Not to mention how strong their kids are. She glanced at Danielle and Laura. Laura didn't reply, and Danielle just sheepishly scratched the back of her head. Well, that's not necessarily a great comparison. I mean, I do have my mom's super strength, so... Danielle shrugged, her voice dimming as it became clear to everybody just how shy the girl had gotten. Yeah, I'd say that probably gives you pretty pro-level powers. Heck, if I had to pick who in this class has the most pro powers, it'd probably be you. Maybe even Laura, and heck, even Bakugo and Todoroki, Kaminari replied. True, but the more versatile powers are usually better. At least that's what Aizawa said. Siyu added, looking dead at Izuku, who shifted slightly under her gaze. Your powers can be pretty explosive, but most of the time you're just making tools and stuff, and that's pretty cool. It's like you got an infinite tool chest, she said. Izuku laughed nervously, scratching the back of his head. Yeah, I've just been trying to make do with learning about them. I mean, I haven't had them for very long, so... What do you mean? Kirishima asked. The whole class began looking towards Izuku, who sweated under their gaze. It was at this point that he realized maybe he should have lied like Melissa did. Though he guessed he didn't have a reason to. Well, my powers only manifested, 3 or 4 months ago. This ring just kind of materialized on my finger and hasn't come off since. Not that I haven't tried. He laughed sheepishly. The silence permeated through the room until a collective shout of "what" could be heard booming through the bus, practically shaking it on its wheels. You only had your powers for a few months? Mina shouted, getting into his face. But they're supposed to manifest when you're a kid. That's only for mutants, mon ami, Aoyama replied. Young Midoriya could be something different, or maybe he's just a late bloomer. Wait, if you're different, just how different are you? Wait, were you exposed to, like, cosmic radiation or something, like the Fantastic Four? Kaminari shouted. That would be metal as hell. I hate to break it to you, but I don't think so. Izuku laughed nervously, sweat pouring down his face. No radiation, no chemical accident, no gamma rays. At least not that I can see, it just kinda happened. He could feel more and more people inching towards him as he spoke, could feel eyes burrowing into his head. Will you all chill out? It's not like it matters, Toph replied, eyes beginning to draw towards her. I was born with my powers, had them since day one. People manifest their powers differently, it's not crazy. I guess, some of the students said. Some of the others, like Mina Ashido, were still looking at Izuku with curiosity-filled eyes. Fine, she finally said, crossing her arms. I guess it's not the weirdest class UA's ever had. I mean, we do have a quirkless person here. Gee, thanks, Riri replied. If Mina's cheeks could have turned any pinker, they would have in that moment. I didn't mean it like that, she said. Riri smirked, raising an eyebrow. Oh? And what did you mean it like? I feel like I should shut up now, Mina replied. You should all shut up, Bakugo said. Like any of your powers matter. The only person whose powers matter here are Izuku? Ochako? Those are the people who beat you in that fight, right? Riri asked to Bakugo's growling. He looked about ready to explode in frustration. Izuku just stared at the scene in awe. He leaned over to Toph. Is Kachan seriously the one getting teased right now? He asked. Heh, UA's fun, Toph said, crossing her arms. When he was surrounded by people even remotely as impressive as he was, it looked like the wind was getting knocked out of Bakugo's sails, and he definitely needed that. All of you shut up. We're here, Aizawa said, his eyes glancing over the class, silencing them with a single movement. The students all filed out one by one, examining the giant structure before them. It was easily as tall as several skyscrapers stacked on top of each other, a large dome that cut into the skyline. It was incredible, at least from Izuku and Melissa's perspective. Riri had definitely seen better. Her adopted father was one of the people who made the X-Men's Danger Room, partially because her adopted mother was a member of the team. She had seen holographic technology that could interact with physical matter, all of it contained within a singular room that was able to replicate anywhere in the universe. Something like this to her felt incredibly cool, but quaint. As the crowds were examining the structure before them, some of their eyes fell upon an individual in the center of the entranceway. She was wearing a spacesuit. The only things recognizable out of her visor were 2 glowing eyes. Almost immediately, Izuku recognized her. Wait, is that 13? He shouted. The rescue hero. The famous rescue hero. the woman whose body was basically a living black hole. Izuku was so busy focusing on her that the environment itself seemed to just fade into the background. He didn't even notice that he was inside of the USJ until he was. And then he was mind blown all over again. A windstorm, a firestorm, a shipwreck. I created all of these scenarios within the USJ with some minor help from Stark Industries. 13 spun around. Our main goal was to make sure that you would be able to handle any and all unforeseen circumstances. That is why this place is known as the USJ. The Unforeseen Situation Joint. Shouldn't All Might be here by now? Aizawa asked. 13 pulled him to the side. Apparently today is a very busy crime day, so most of our faculty won't be showing up, at least not for another hour. 13 replied. Seriously? Can't another hero cover it? Aizawa asked. It would likely take an entire agency to try. The only person who would likely be able to do it on her own would be Tatsumaki, and you know as well as I do that it's pretty much impossible to get her on any kind of schedule. 13 replied. Aizawa felt his eye twitch.
Let me guess, you already reached out to her and she didn't respond to any texts.
And she hung up on all of her calls, 13 replied.
I swear, it's like every hero is the height of irresponsibility.
Aizawa wiped the crust out of his eyes.
Fine, it should be okay with just the two of us, for now. You take charge.
Aizawa stepped back and 13 nodded, walking to the front of the class. Thank you, Eraserhead. Now I have a couple of things I'd like to say to the students. Maybe more than a couple. Maybe 3 or 4 or a dozen, she joked, making sure that she had the attention of everybody. As you know, I have a rather powerful quirk. As she began, many students began paying close attention to her. She was, after all, one of the most impressive heroes in our country. There were some, however, who began tuning her out almost the second she began giving the powerful quirk talk. Those students were the kind of people who had already heard that talk before, particularly Laura, who had heard the whole be responsible with your power spiel from at least several people at least a dozen times. So, instead of listening to it again, she allowed her eyes to drift shut. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to calm herself down from the whirlwind of emotions she had been feeling for the last couple of days. And she immediately regretted that decision. A new scent entered her nostrils. It was something different. It didn't match the scent of anybody in the room. She opened her eyes, her enhanced sight picking up a warbling in front of the fountain in the middle of the USJ. It looked like some kind of teleporting mutant ability. It almost reminded her of how the air looked before Nightcrawler would poof into a room. The warbling grew stronger until it condensed, the head of somebody stepping into the space. Somebody with a hand on his face, wearing it like a mask. But from the smell she got off of it, it was real flesh. Without thinking about it, she unsheathed her claws from her fists. The sound of the metal sheening out into the open drew the attention of her classmates who looked at her in confusion. Aizawa got up in her face, probably ready to give her the dressing down of a lifetime, until he too looked in the same direction she was. Now he was getting battle ready. Slowly, the distortion got worse. The darkness spread. Dozens upon dozens of monsters began seeping out of the area, followed by people. Most of them were people that the students didn't recognize, but then it got bad. Very bad, very quickly. First, a large behemoth of a man exited, alongside the man with the hand on his face. Blob. Laura knew him almost immediately. An enemy of the X-Men. Just like Pyro was, who stepped out right after him. And Mortimer? Tsuyu replied next to Laura. She was right. Mortimer Tonby, known to the X-Men as Toad. Heck, he was known to most of the population as Toad. Laura's confusion deepened. Why would this girl know him by his first name? She didn't have time to think about it, because the last people who entered the room were by far the worst. The first person who entered smelled like her. A lot like her. It was a smell that reminded her so much of her father that it almost made her sick. To make matters worse, he looked a bit like Logan too. Not completely, almost like a younger version of him, but that just made it worse. Was he Weapon X? Had they cloned more of them? The smell changed to a more familiar one as another person walked in. She felt the blood in her veins go completely cold. She had seen this man once, and only once. It was back when she was first getting to know her father, and her father looked at her in that moment with the most fear that she had ever seen on his face. He told her very, very clearly back then to stay away from this man, as far away as she could. Laura had been an assassin for most of her life. She was trained to fight since she could stand, and Logan knew that. Logan was never really scared for her in physical situations. It was her mental state that he was more worried about, but she saw pure fear in his eyes when he told her, when he looked at her and said, "Run." Run, because he was coming. Sabretooth. When that name exited her lips, the man below looked up at her, a wide smile crossing his face as he laughed. She knew he said something, and her enhanced hearing should have been able to pick it up, but her brain was just frozen. It was like all of her processing power had just stopped, like the entire world around her was slowly fading away and dropping into blackness. She barely managed to process the last figures who exited the mist. The man with a head seemingly made of shadow, who was likely responsible for controlling the portal in the first place, and a large bestial creature beside him. Wait, aren't those guys... Denki Keminari stepped back. He was used to electricity pulsing through his body, but right now his body felt like it was being run through with live wire, like it was shocking him to his core and his heart was beating out of rhythm. They're the Brotherhood. They're with Magnetos. Riri looked down at them. She didn't recognize half of the people in that group, but the other half, she and most of the world knew pretty well. Thankfully, Magneto himself wasn't here, but if those guys were, if Magneto's Brotherhood was around, and even worse, if they had gotten bigger, she immediately got ready. She forced her faceplate to slide down as the power in her suit began surging around every part of it. "Friday, send a distress call to Iron Man. Now," she ordered. Her suit chirped in response before a robotic voice bit back at her. "Distress functionality, not active," Friday's voice came back. "What the hell do you mean, not active?" Riri asked. "It would appear wireless functionality outside of this building has been cut off. Defensive protocol recommended," Friday's voice replied. Aizawa jumped in front of his students, forming a separative wall between his students and the people below. He didn't understand. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants was certainly not subtle, sure, but whenever they showed up, they did it with their leader in tow. Where was he? His eyes darted around the room. Magneto was nowhere to be seen. What kind of game was he playing? "All of you, stay behind me. I'm sure I don't need to tell you how dangerous half of these people are, and if the Brotherhood's gotten bigger, you can bet that those people down there with them are just as lethal." Eraserhead's voice was about as calm as it always was, but there was an undertone to it that only a few students could really make out. Laura Kinney and Danielle Cage were among them. Those two were people who had experienced true danger. Granted, quite a few of the students had experienced danger before, but Danielle's parents had taken her out on missions before, and Laura used to be an assassin. Both of them knew when a superior was scared, and both of them knew that that was the point when things got serious. The man with hands glued all over his body looked up at them. "That's strange. The only heroes I see here are Eraserhead and 13. The shadowy figure next to him glanced over to his master. "It is perplexing. Based on our schedule, not only should All Might be here, but Mirko and Wolverine as well. This might be bad. Time is of the essence here." Izuku looked down at them. He was right. He was right to feel suspicious yesterday, when the press had managed to barge onto campus. "You used the press as cover. You used their stampede to gain access into UA." The leader below, hearing their voice, looked up at him. "Well, at least the brat is here. That should make him happy, but where's the big one? Where is he? Where's the symbol of Japanese peace?" The boy tilted his head. His voice sounded almost hoarse, like somebody who had been talking for hours and hours on end already. Izuku basically drowned out the second half of that sentence. The brat. He said at least the brat was here, while looking dead at him. Did those guys know who he was? He had never even seen any of these people before. "To hell with that," Sabretooth said next to him. "Where the hell is Wolverine?" he shouted to the crowd. Everybody tensed up. Laura even felt herself taking a step back. She felt sweat pooling down her face. She was afraid. She wasn't used to that. "Oh, his run's here. I guess I can have some fun toying with you before the main man himself shows up. I wonder if you inherited his healing factor. Let's find out. Might I remind you that you agreed to abide by my master's wishes?" The mist figure turned to him. Sabretooth glanced at the guy. "Go right ahead. Maybe by taking out some NPCs we can summon one of the bosses." "Why aren't the alarms going off?" Momo Yaoyorozu asked. She turned not to her teacher, but to her friend. To the person that she was sure was the smartest person in this building, Riri Williams. The girl's faceplate slid back once more. "Nothing's escaping this building. Those alarms could be ringing 1,000 times a second and no hero out there would hear them. They probably put up some kind of Faraday cage. Or maybe they have somebody with a soundproofing power. If they worked this hard to make sure no help would be coming, then I doubt they'd want a stray sound to make it out into the atmosphere and summon Superman or something. So, we're alone? Kirishima whispered, the reality sinking into him. This is a kill room, Laura muttered, the others looking to her. They teleported in to make sure nobody could see them from the outside. They made sure we couldn't call for help, and from the way they're talking down there, they're looking for specific people. They have targets in mind. They're here to take them out and leave. They've chosen their targets very specifically, which also means they've chosen their timing very specifically, at a period when not one, but 3 of the top heroes in the country were supposed to be teaching. I'd wager this Faraday effect that Williams is talking about probably has to do with one of their quirks. Todoroki replied, narrowing his eyes at the advancing military. Whatever they're doing down there, they thought this through, which means Kinney's right. They didn't come here on a whim. They have some kind of objective in mind. Aizawa stepped forward. If Williams is right, none of our communications are gonna work, then I'll have to hold them off. 13, you lead the kids out of here. Wait, you're gonna go fight all those guys on your own? Are you insane? Riri asked Aizawa. She's right, Izuku said, snapping out of his stupor. Even if you could fully nullify all of their quirks, you're still facing an army down there. There are fighting styles that allow people to do that, sure, but yours isn't one of them. You're much more suited to one-on-one combat. You know, Midoriya, with how much you studied the quirkless heroes of the world, I thought you would have learned that no hero goes into a situation with one trick. Eraserhead replied, jumping into the scene. He did seem to have an advantage almost right away. Every villain down there seemed to be heavily relying on their abilities, and face-to-face with Aizawa, those abilities were useless. He nullified half of them within the first moment, knocking them around like ping-pong paddles and using his capture tape to bind up as many as he could, using some to throw into others. 13, meanwhile, began to lead the students away towards the back of the USJ. Unfortunately, that plan didn't work out very well. They were mere steps away from freedom when the ground beneath them went black. Rising out of the ground, there stood the Shadow Man. His aura alone blocking their path more than his physical presence. It's a pleasure to meet you. You might be acquainted with some of our friends from the Brotherhood, but make no mistake, they're here to help us. We are a new organization, but our goals are aligned. A new world for mutant kind, one that starts here. We are the League of Villains, and I know it isn't polite, but... A dust cloud erupted in his place as a rock from the ground jutted up, striking him right where his head would be if it was solid. You know, there's something I learned a lot from all those fights Crybabies made me listen to over the years. Villains monologue a lot. I always thought people should take more advantage of that. In that same instance, Bakugo appeared directly above the villain, launching a blast from his palm that completely enveloped where he was standing. Todoroki, standing beside him, shot a beam of ice directly through the area as well. Very proactive, children. You certainly live up to the title of hero, the man responded. He seemingly disappeared in the new gigantic cloud of energy that appeared from every converging attack. But you should really be more careful. 13's eyes widened as she watched the cloud of darkness erupting from the villain spread further and further. In that same instance, Bakugo appeared directly above the villain, launching a blast from his palm that completely enveloped where he was standing. Todoroki, standing beside him, shot a beam of ice directly through the area as well. Very proactive, children. You certainly live up to the title of hero, the man responded. He seemingly disappeared in the new gigantic cloud of energy that appeared from every converging attack. But you should really be more careful. Everyone, get back! 13 ordered. It didn't matter. The shadows were spreading around them so thoroughly that there wasn't anywhere they could run if they wanted to. I'll spread you throughout the facility. There are several members who would be very willing to get a piece of you, especially since some of you are rather important to them. The shadows began spreading around them, circling them like a vortex of death. Ida barely managed to tackle 2 students away from the area of effect, making them safe, at least for now, but everybody else wasn't so lucky. Izuku tried his best to create a shield around his fellow students, but the sheer pressure of the environment was just too much. Shortly, it began crumbling and cracking away, until finally it shattered, the portal completely enveloping him as well. He tried to thrash around, to find something to latch onto, but he couldn't. There was nothing. It was like he was floating in the void of space. Izuku Midoriya, I was curious what you'd look like. Izuku for some reason couldn't bring himself to talk. It was like the fear was pushing through his throat, closing it. Who the heck were these guys? Don't worry, young man. We aren't here to kill you. At least not yet. There's something we have to check first. So you'll be joining your friends below. I do hope you can keep them and yourself alive at the same time. I wonder just how far you can be pushed today. Why don't we find out together? Izuku blinked, the blackness filling his vision slowly fading away, replaced by light. He found himself above the air in the USJ, falling toward the ground. Izuku's vision, once black, now filled to the brim with light to reveal the water. He was falling towards the water. He concentrated his ring, forming a parachute, allowing himself to drift slower than his enemies had probably anticipated. He used this little bit of extra time to look below, and when he did, he saw both Tsuyu and Mina Ashido stranded in the water. And there was something inside of it with them. Many somethings, but only one actively following Tsu. Most of the villains were circling the water trying to find stragglers. Some of them were looking up at him, but there was one shadow that was following directly behind Tsu. She wasn't attacking it, but it was closest to her, and it was moving quickly enough that she didn't seem to be able to keep up with it. It kept pummeling her body over and over, until it disappeared into another section of the sea entirely. Honestly, Izuku's eyes were having trouble tracking it. Mina, meanwhile, was struggling just to keep her head above water. They had done something to the replica ocean. It was completely out of sorts. Its waves were forming giant peaks and crests that were crashing against the people below. He couldn't concern himself with who these villains were now, and why they apparently were aware of him. He had to help his classmates, but how? The situation barely made sense to him. For one thing, if anybody should have been mobile in the water, it was Tsu. Why wasn't she fighting back? Izuku forced his brain into motion. He canceled the parachute that kept him above the air, allowing himself to fall to the ground. He used his ring to form a rebreather and goggles on his face as he continued to fall, eventually splashing down into the surface. He looked around as the bubbles from his landing cleared. Under the water, he got a much better look at who the villains that his classmates were fighting were. The one that was circling Tsu was Toad. Well, that made sense. Their power sets were very similar, but Toad still must have been able to run circles around her. Magneto kept him around for a reason, after all, Izuku figured. He clenched his fist, allowing his imagination to flow freely as he created a grappling hook with his mind. He shot it forward, pulling Tsuyu towards him. He used the same trick to grab Ashido. But helping both of them right now meant that both of his hands were full. He had to use them just to keep the other two from floating off in the rough tides. He tried focusing his rings into something simple, a jetpack to push him out of the water, and he succeeded. But that honestly made the problem worse somehow. Once he was outside of the cold water, the air around him got warmer, and then hotter, and then extremely hot. He could feel it beginning to burn against his skin. He looked into the sky, seeing a giant flaming creature circling him overhead. "Careful, kid. You know what they say about people getting too close to the sun," Izuku heard from shore. He looked over. Pyro. Izuku knew all of this guy's powers just off the top of his head. He could control flames. And from the look of the flamethrower on his back, he would have more than enough flames to work with. Izuku barely managed to dodge out of the way of the flaming bird that scraped by his body. He needed to get to the ground quickly. Thankfully, once out of the water, Tsuyu Asui had come to her senses. She shot her tongue out of her mouth, wrapping it around the ledge of a ship and dragging them all towards it. The trio crashed into the deck, the flaming bird still circling overhead. Izuku forced himself up, clearing his mind as he created a shield around the three of them. It was just strong enough to repel the phoenix as it crashed into the shield and dissipated, exploding into nothingness. On the shore, Pyro began unleashing more flames. Thankfully, according to Izuku's research on the fights that the Brotherhood had gotten into, they had a few more minutes. It would take Pyro a while to build up enough flames to come after them again. He allowed himself to breathe out a small sigh of relief as he turned to Tsuyu. "Thanks, Tsu. You really saved my life," he smiled. Tsu just nodded at him, staring over the bow of the ship. "You know, Midoriya, I was really excited about today. It turned out pretty terrible, though," she said, her voice still having the same tone of neutrality that it always did, but it felt off to Izuku this time, like there was something deeper in it. "Yeah, I know, believe me." Izuku shivered, remembering the teleporting villain's voice in his ears. And then he remembered something else. Something their masked leader said. Wait, did you guys hear what those guys were talking about earlier? Were they looking for All Might? Izuku asked. Mina nodded. They were also looking for Wolverine and Mirko, though. Plus, it looked like they wanted at least a couple of people in our class, Mina said. True, Izuku muttered. They seemed to know exactly what they were doing. They probably got a hold of a schedule or something. So they knew when 3 of Japan's strongest heroes would be in the same place and they went anyway? That's stupid, Mina replied. Maybe if they brought Magneto with them, they'd stand a chance, but these guys? I don't know about that. These guys include Sabretooth. Izuku sweated slightly. Not to mention, there are a million different things in the world that can be used to kill a powerful opponent. I think if they came here with that intent in mind, they're pretty sure they can pull it off. But to be honest, I don't see a point. Even if they did win, wouldn't the Justice League just come and get them? All Might's a member. Mina's pink skin went pale, almost white. Her brain tuned out almost everything Izuku said past All Might potentially losing. Wait, are you saying those guys out there can kill All Might? And we're just stuck in here with them? I don't think all of them are that strong. It's okay, calm down, he said, trying to keep the girl from hyperventilating. Well, all of them might not be that strong, but if they have a weapon that can kill All Might, it's safe to say that any one of them could have it. Plus, all of these people could probably kill us, Tsuyu replied. You're not really helping, Izuku said back. Tsuyu shrugged. Sorry. As she spoke, from below, Toad started circling the waters. Behind him, there were dozens upon dozens of people who seemed to be following his direct command. He poked his head out of the water, looking to the people on the ship. Come on, Sue. Don't you want to play? Can't hide up there with your friends forever. His voice taunted below. Tsuyu Asui stiffened, her grip on the bow of the ship tightening, the neutral expression on her face pushing into a frown. Wait, Sue? You know a member of Magneto's Brotherhood? Mina asked. Yeah, Sue replied as the ship shook, the people around them slamming into the sides of the vessel, using their momentum to turn themselves into human cannonballs. That gave Izuku an idea. He allowed himself to concentrate once more, focusing his energy into a construct. A cannon at the edge of the ship sat on the bow. He fired into the water a few times, just enough to keep the soldiers from slamming into them. As they began to scatter, Izuku took a breath, and then another one. He had to force himself to be calm, but he could feel his heart beating in his chest. He might have been preparing to be a hero his whole life, but he was still a student. And if he was being honest, he was kind of terrified. But there was something else weighing on him. He was the class rep. He might have not really wanted the job, but he was class president. He had a responsibility to bring these people together. He had to focus them. It was on him whether they got out of here alive or not. Guys, we have to work together here. If these guys think they can take out some of the strongest heroes in Japan, if they're going after our classmates, outside from himself, Izuku bitterly reminded himself, then we have to stop them. We're heroes, right? He knelt beside Mina, who seemed to slowly be pulling herself back together. She nodded at him. Thanks, class press. I just needed a second. I'm good now. She gave him a thumbs up. Izuku could tell that the girl still looked a bit sick. This was, after all, their first time being in actual danger. But she was brave. Izuku was terrified too, but thankfully, he supposed, he had an experience with an actual villain before now, on the day his powers awakened. That experience allowed him to stay a little bit more composed. Sue? Izuku looked at the girl, the ship quaking once more. I don't know what's going on with you, and I'm not going to make you talk about it. I don't know what that guy down there is to you, but... Sue looked back at Izuku. Izuku could tell, even though the girl was drenched in water from the sea, that there were tears pooling around her eyes. He's... family. Even with the extra emotion on her face, her voice for some reason refused to give in. She was talking in the same tone she had on the bus, when they were just talking about their powers. Before everything had exploded in their faces. Sue. Tsuyu wiped her eyes, forcing a more determined look on her face. You're right, Midoriya. I don't have time for this. Our classmates are in trouble, and All Might be in trouble. I can put aside my feelings for now. I can be a hero. She clenched her fist. Izuku smiled and nodded, thankful for the strength of the people that he got stuck with. You have got to be kidding me, Toph said, irritated outright by the people she was unlucky enough to get stuck with. The dark cloud had managed to drop her into the middle of the mountains. She wasn't even in front of anything hyper-dangerous. Well, she was, but this guy she was pretty sure she could handle. She was in front of the blob. She knew a lot about his powers from Izuku's rants. He always tried his best to examine any person whose powers were public knowledge, whether they were hero or villain. That's why she knew that the guy in front of her had gravity manipulation powers. He could become strong, immovable. He had enough strength to crack mountains. But that only mattered if he actually got close to her, and she was pretty damn good at keeping her distance. Unfortunately, the people around her weren't. Toph was sent through with 2 people, Fumikage Tokoyami and Denki Kaminari. While Tokoyami was capable of fighting at a distance, apparently his powers were pretty useless when it was bright outside. And while Toph herself couldn't see it, she'd been reliably informed that it was. Apparently the entire area was drenched in light. They were outdoors and there were no coverings for him to work with. But he had still been managing. His power wasn't as big or explosive as it was during their training sessions a few days ago, but he was still managing to keep his distance and use his power to deal out minimal damage. It was Kaminari that was starting to piss her off. "I cannot believe I almost lost to you. You have lightning powers. You can attack from a distance. Why do you keep trying to punch him?" Toph shouted. At this point, Toph was fighting the urge to deck her own teammate. "It's not my fault. None of my distance attacks are scratching this guy. If I can just get close enough..." "You can't get close enough," Toph said bitterly. "And don't you dare try to burn yourself out. I've seen what you look like when you let loose full power." She had indeed, back when they were facing against each other. His big attack would have taken her down, but he missed. And the second he missed, he was next to useless. His brain had completely stopped working. He didn't even make a move to dodge against the attack from her that had completely laid him out. She sighed to herself. She couldn't have gotten any of the heavy hitters. She couldn't have gotten any of the students who were really good distance fighters or who could fry a guy from a mile away. And, most frustratingly to her, she herself couldn't put a dent in the giant she was fighting. This nearly impenetrable mountain of a man in front of her. No matter how much she attacked him, the rocks seemed to break against his skin. At best, she was throwing him down. "I wish Crybaby was here," she muttered to herself. Izuku would have been able to make the most of all of their power sets. His stupid brain probably would have come up with a way for all of them to use their powers together in like a combo attack or something. She swore if she got through this, she was never going to let that boy out of arm's reach again. "If you continue slowing him down, I might be able to assist you. I may not be Midoriya, but I've been known to come up with a plan or two," Tokoyami said next to her. The smaller dark shadow puffed himself up as much as he could next to Tokoyami. "Wait, you got an idea brewing in that head of yours?" He sure doesn't," Dark Shadow chirped over the boy's shoulder. "I'm working on it," Tokoyami replied. Toph stayed silent. She knew she wasn't going to be able to brute force the situation as much as she really, really wanted to. Short of cracking the earth open, nothing she was doing was going to win this fight. And when it came to planning, she was no Izuku. She didn't realize how much she'd miss her best friend in a situation like this. She hoped he was okay. "Work quickly," she ordered. Tokoyami nodded as he fell to the back lines, which left just Toph and Kaminari to take the front. Laura had never bled this much before. She couldn't count the amount of stab wounds on her body. They had been growing and growing at an exponential rate from Sabretooth, and from the other boy who smelled so much like her father. Thankfully, Danielle Cage had been next to her. They got teleported to the same location, and the girl was basically a living shield. It was because of Danielle's presence that Laura wasn't chopped to pieces by Sabretooth. The first few hits that he managed to get on Laura were bad. She felt his claws dig into her chest, her ribs, her heart. A couple of them dug into her jugular vein. If she couldn't heal, she would have been dead at least 3 times. She counted. Danielle herself wasn't doing that great against him either. Despite the fact that she was bulletproof and she had at least half the strength of her mother, this guy was a living tank. None of his attacks were strong enough to break her skin, but she could still feel them pushing against her organs, rattling her blood inside her body to the extent that she felt like a shaken-up paint can. But she was still okay enough to hold her ground. She was fine enough to not let this thing past her to her classmate. "You know, you're not bad, kid," Sabretooth said, wiping blood off his face from Danielle's last punch. "Gee, thanks," Danielle muttered to herself. She wasn't sure how long she could keep this up. She would just have to keep going. If she faltered, Laura was going to be stuck fighting 2 people, and that wouldn't be good for either of them. Speaking of, Laura was now exchanging fist blows with the person who smelled like her father. She wasn't sure if he could heal like she could, and her father wanted her to get away from killing, so she was trying to not use her claws. This guy was faster than her, though. Much faster. "Still not a word out of you yet, huh?" he said, kicking her into the ground. "What, not curious why I smell like your old man?" "Stop talking." Laura replied, continuing her assault. She figured that if somebody was running with Magneto's crew and offering to tell her something, that it was going to be a lie. And even if it wasn't, she was sure she wouldn't like the answer. These people weren't on her side. She wouldn't listen to them. She wouldn't give them the opportunity to get in her head. She had too much of Weapon X digging around in her skull already. She maneuvered herself in order to attack him again, moving to strike him with her foot. But before she could even get into halfway position, he grabbed her ankle, pulling her forward and driving his fist directly into her gut. It hurt. It hurt a lot more than she expected to. It was like something was tearing through her. She looked down. There were claws coming out of her hands, right around where his wrist was, and his knuckles. He had their powers. Holy crap, that was close, Riri said to herself. Ida had just managed to tackle her out of the way of the all-encompassing void that teleported the others. She slid her helmet on, ordering Friday to hack into all the cameras within the facility. Just because her technology couldn't reach outside of this place didn't mean that it couldn't reach within it. So she was trying to get a bigger grasp of what exactly was going on here. And she saw it. Her classmates were fighting for their lives. Through the security camera she watched, they were separated. These villains clearly knew what they were doing. But what was she going to do about it? She could maybe use her tech to force herself to move fast, to maneuver to any one of these groups and give them backup. Maybe she could turn the tide, but what a nightmare, she admitted to herself. Even if she was able to get to one of these groups, the rest of them would have to go without help. The only other person that Ida had managed to save from the teleportation was Momo. And while Riri had no doubt that the girl was strong and versatile, she wasn't quick. If Riri went by herself to help the others, Momo would have to try and help one of the others by herself. She would have to try and get there on foot. And she probably wouldn't be able to get there by herself with all of these groups around trying to attack them. And if Riri took Momo with her, well, she wouldn't feel right if something happened. Not to mention that down below, Aizawa's fight had taken a turn for the worst. It didn't take a genius to see that he was on his last legs. The leader of this group, the person with the hand stapled to his face, had stepped in. And not only had he stepped in with a giant monstrosity behind him. The thing that looked like it hit like a freight train. Aizawa was out of breath just trying to keep up with it. He was getting hit more and more. Hey, Ida? She turned to the boy. She saw him stiffen in response. Clearly he was still a little surprised by her using his first name. If you were to get out of here, how quickly could you go? If you mean to get help, I likely couldn't go as fast as you in your suit. I might be able to maneuver fast in here, but I can't fly properly. You know, you watched my fight, she said. Her faceplate slid up once more as she looked into Ida's eyes, making sure the boy understood her intention behind them. She made sure that he could see the fact that she was pleading with him. On foot, in a place where we have to make tight turns? You know, like out there in the city streets? You're probably the best bet. Ida nodded slowly. I think I can go fast, but I don't think I can go fast enough to get help if that's what you're thinking. It'll easily be half an hour before I can find somebody if All Might's out in the city somewhere. And who knows what could happen by then, he said. He found Riri nodding, turning to Momo. I think I might be able to help with that. I have an idea, and it doesn't seem like a very good one, but it's one that I'm willing to try if you are. So the only question I have left is, do you guys trust me? Momo nodded without hesitation, Ida following very closely behind. If you have the class vice president's vote, you have mine as well. Great. In that case, Friday, I want you to put all of my power into my suit's hydraulics. Give me as much physical strength as you can, Riri ordered, her faceplate sliding down once more, clicking into place. She would have to wait for the right moment. The teleporter would be watching them. Thankfully, 13 was keeping him kinda busy. It would buy them time. Here's what we're gonna do, Izuku said, forming a makeshift huddle with his team. Thankfully, the boy had been able to use his powers to create shields to keep danger at bay for the most part. To keep both the fire and the villains circling just below them to stay off his back for long enough to relay this plan to his teammates. Mina seemed to be very nervous the entire time he was talking. She slowly got more and more steady, but Izuku could tell she was just committing herself to the plan. It wasn't because she had any confidence in it. And to be honest, Izuku didn't really feel like he had much confidence in it. If Toph were here, well, actually he was pretty glad Toph wasn't here. She'd be pretty useless on a boat. Though he was also sure Toph would have smacked him for saying that. He almost laughed at the thought. Him being smacked around by his best friend sounded a lot better than the nerve-wracking feeling he had now of being looked at by the others as their leader. He held up his fingers. 5 fingers, 4 fingers, 3, As he got to 2 fingers, he could practically feel his heart stopping in his chest. He had to force it to keep going out of sheer willpower at this point. He wasn't allowed to get out of the situation. That meant his heart couldn't quit on him either. 2 fingers, 1 finger. He closed his fist. 0. With his fist closed, Mina stood up, spraying as much concentrated acid as she could directly at Izuku. He held up his hands in front of his face, the acid slowly becoming enveloped in a bubble that continued to grow and grow in size. Eventually, it got to the point that it was nearly twice the size of Izuku. Mina looked at him exhausted. Everything in the girl's face told Izuku that she was all out of steam. The boat shook again. "Sue!" Izuku shouted. "On it," she affirmed. There was a quake in her voice that told Izuku she was still nervous, but he knew that she was going to go through with it anyway. She was brave enough. She leapt off the banister of the boat, leaping into the water. Almost immediately, she was surrounded by hordes of villains. They all began circling her like a shark, but she was the strongest swimmer of their group. She was the fastest. It was just inherent in her quirk. If anybody could manage to maneuver around the water, around them, it was her. Izuku had to remind himself of that as he saw the shadows beneath the water moving towards where Sue was. They were darting around so quickly, congealing into one spot, that it began to look like there was just one solid black mass following her around in the water. A mass that peeled away from the ship until every villain was following her, trying to chase Suyu. And now, she jumped far, far ahead of them, her swimming speed doubling and then tripling, leaving them in the dust. Everybody, except for one. A couple of dozen feet away from the conglomeration of villains, Izuku could see the head of Toad poking up out of the water. Unfortunately, he wasn't lumped in with the rest of them, but it would have to do. Izuku focused the orb of acid he collected. He had never tried to make an object fly quite like this. Most of the time he just made tools. It was an interesting time to try experimenting, but he figured, when your back was against the wall, you might as well. He shoved the green orb through the air. He concentrated, making sure that it was no longer airtight, putting small perforations in the orb's surface as it flew over the villains in the water. It slowly began a sprinkle of acid that became more of a downpour. It wasn't long until most of the villains who attempted to attack them on the ship were under the acid's effect. They panicked, scrambling in every direction, trying in vain to extinguish the substance, and in their mad dash, the last place they were was next to Izuku's group. The ship was safe in the water now. Now, he just had to deal with Pyro. He would have to hope that Suyu could deal with her family on her own. He turned to the man on shore. The man hadn't cared even a little bit about his other team members deserting. If anything, it seemed a source of inspiration for him. With such little firepower on the ground, he dedicated himself to making as much creative firepower as he could in the air. The phoenixes that exploded on contact were no longer his main focus. They were replaced with a giant air force made entirely of flame, jets circling overhead, bullets raining down on them made of fire. Izuku and Mina had to take cover behind one of the ship's doors to not get ignited, and Izuku inwardly cursed at himself. Both of their powers worked on imagination, but this guy's imagination was clearly much stronger than his. He couldn't do any giant flashy things on command. They always happened by accident. He couldn't overpower Pyro's creations. He had to take out the man directly. That was the only way Izuku knew of ending this fight. But the second he stepped out into the open, he knew he would be a dead man. That was a certainty. So one of 2 things would have to happen. He would either suddenly have to become unbreakable enough to withstand the rain of hellfire, or become evasive enough for Pyro not to be able to touch him. He chose to, at least, attempt to go for both. He took a deep breath, getting ready to run out into the open, as Mina gave him a smile. "Get his ass, Midoriya," she said, her face morphing into one meant to be supportive, to give him confidence, to boost his will. Thankfully, it had its intended effect. It gave him just enough courage to run out into the open. He immediately felt the heat circling overhead as fire began converging on his position. He concentrated, forcing the image of Captain America's shield in his head. He raised the disc over his body. He felt the continued pelting of bullets make contact, but none of them hit. He could already feel the shield beginning to crack, though, so he had to move faster. He ran, building up as much speed as he could, before bouncing off the banister that separated the ship from the ocean. He had a lot of practice with acrobatics from watching Robin back in the days when he thought he was going to be a quirkless hero. He used those skills to leap into the air, twisting himself in a perfect motion to give as much distance as he could between him and the ship before hitting the water. While he was still midair, he focused again. He needed not just to move, but to move through the air, to fly. He could have tried to replicate Iron Man's gauntlets, but Riri Williams, a person who was the adopted daughter of Iron Man of all people, could barely fly with her own gauntlets, and she actually knew how those things worked. He couldn't afford to lose track of where he was going in the air, so his mind shifted. Grappling hook, he decided again. The flaming planes circling overhead locked onto his position once more. As he began feeling the heat from one of them dive-bombing him, he reached his hand forward, clicking against the trigger of a grappling hook that manifested in his hand. The end of the grappling hook shot forward with the speed of a bullet. Pyro saw it coming, dodging it, thinking it was an attack only directed towards him. He only realized that he wasn't its target when he heard the crunch of the hook's claw attaching to the dirt next to him. The plane dive-bombing Izuku only met the water, as he disappeared in a blur. For a moment, it felt like Izuku's arm was going to fall out of his socket. He had to form a guard under his uniform to hold his arm in place with all the intense G-forces. He formed goggles over his head to allow him to see against the high rushing of the wind, allowing him to maneuver just where he wanted. Pyro flinched, attempting to guard his face as the speeding boy became much more than a blip. The small dot in his eyeline appeared directly next to him, growing and growing in size until it was a fully fledged person, a person with his fist reeled back, ready to make contact. And when it did, a thunderous crack rang through the area. Dust kicked up from the floor as the ground beneath Pyro splintered. Pyro tumbled, skipping across the ground as he collided into a wall at top speeds, exploding in a cloud of dust. Izuku dropped to his knees, panting as the world around him mercifully came to a stop. Now he just needed to find Sue, and he didn't see her in the water. He felt his throat closing as panic rose in his voice. "Sue?" he shouted. "She was supposed to be around here. She said that Toad wouldn't be able to keep up with her. She said that she would keep him busy, keep him circling, but she didn't. She must have kept going. She must have kept trying to isolate both of them. She was trying to be alone with that guy. That was bad. It meant that he didn't know where they were, or how to help her." Hey everybody, thank you so much for checking out another episode of Earth OCU, My Hero Academia Edition. And because it's coming out over December, I just want to say happy holidays to everybody. Well, we are back to the Earth OCU stuff now. First off, I do want to say thank you so much for the incredible support that the Avatars and the Alchemist received. There is going to be another one of those videos coming out soon. Like I said in that video, I have quite a few of those scripts done, so I'm going to be turning them into videos soon. The next OCU video to come out, on the other hand, is one I'm working on right now. It should be an episode of Omnifalls, so get ready for that to hit you in the near future. Giving myself more diversity in writing is really making it a lot of fun for me again, and I want to thank you all for being supportive of that. As for this video, I just want to say it was a lot of fun stepping back into this world. I always have fun getting to work on these characters' relationships with each other, and we're finally at the USJ invasion, which I have been so excited about since I started the series. I didn't even get to all of the characters who are in fights right now. Hopefully you guys can see why this video is insanely long already. I look forward to seeing you guys very, very soon, but in the meantime, if you like this video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like, and be sure to comment to let me know what you liked about it. Finally, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the future of this or any other series that I produce. In the meantime, I've been your captain, and it's been a pleasure to take you on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. I'll see you next time.